January 26, 1945. 2:20 p.m. The snow-covered fields surrounding Holzweiler, France, were a scene of smoke and chaos, yet something extraordinary unfolded. Atop a burning tank destroyer, a lone American soldier was systematically halting the advance of an entire German company. The elite mountain troops of the 2nd Jebergs Division, seasoned veterans transferred from Norway for this offensive, found themselves frozen in disbelief, stopped cold by what seemed to be a boy weighing no more than 50 kilograms. Behind their lines, 6 formidable tanks, Panzer IVs and tank destroyers that had crushed opposition across Europe remained stalled, their commanders too stunned to move forward without infantry support, which was being eliminated methodically by a single American. The 250 men of this reinforced German company had stumbled into what Wehrmacht tactical doctrine deemed impossible, one soldier holding a position against a combined arms assault. The numbers were brutal, 40 exhausted Americans facing 250 elite German mountain troops and 6 armored vehicles. By all conventional military logic, the American position should have fallen within minutes. Yet, for an impossible hour, 2nd Lieutenant Audie Leon Murphy would redefine the rules of combat. His journey to that burning tank destroyer began in the cotton fields of Hunt County, Texas, where he was born on June 20, 1925, to impoverished sharecroppers. The 6th of 12 children, Murphy's childhood was shaped by severe poverty and early responsibility. His father abandoned the family when Audie was 12, and his mother succumbed to endocarditis and pneumonia in 1941, leaving the 16-year-old as the primary caregiver for his younger siblings. "If I don't hit what I shoot at, my family goes hungry tonight," young Murphy confided to neighbor Monroe Hackney, explaining his remarkable accuracy. The boy could drop a running rabbit at 50 yards with a .22 rifle that most people couldn't hit a barn with. Each bullet carried a cost the family could barely afford, each miss meant an empty stomach. Under such pressures, Murphy developed a shooter's instinct that would later terrify German soldiers across 3 countries. When Pearl Harbor was attacked, Murphy saw his opportunity. The military offered steady pay, regular meals, and the ability to send money home. Yet enlisting was challenging for the undersized teen. Standing only 5 feet 5 inches and weighing 110 pounds, Murphy was rejected by the Marines, Navy, and even Army paratroopers. Finally, the regular Army accepted him on June 30, 1942, after his sister Karen provided a falsified affidavit claiming he was 18. Private First Class David Mouse McClure, who trained alongside Murphy at Camp Walters, Texas, later recalled, "We all thought he was a mascot at first, this kid who looked about 14 and weighed next to nothing." The drill sergeants tormented him endlessly, calling him baby. But there was something about his gaze. On the rifle range, those pale blue eyes turned icy, and he never missed. Murphy's transformation from a Texas farm boy into a deadly soldier began with the invasion of Sicily in July 1943. Company B, 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division, landed at Licata under Patton's 7th Army. In Sicily's mountains, Murphy discovered a terrifying truth: he was extraordinarily effective at killing. His rural upbringing had taught him stealth, terrain use, and quick, precise shooting. Near Palermo, when his unit was pinned by machine gun fire, Murphy maneuvered around the enemy, eliminated the crew with grenades, and turned their weapon against retreating forces. Captain Paul Harris recommended him for the Bronze Star, noting, "This soldier displays a natural aptitude for combat extraordinary in someone so young and inexperienced." The Italian campaign elevated Murphy from a competent soldier to a legendary warrior. At the Volo River crossing in October 1943, he single-handedly repelled a German counterattack after his squad was decimated, using a borrowed sniper rifle to kill 5 enemies at over 300 yards, earning the Distinguished Service Cross. Staff Sergeant William Polson described Murphy's method: "Murphy didn't fight with anger, that's what made him terrifying. He fought coldly, calculated, like arithmetic. Spot a German, eliminate the German, move to the next. No hesitation, no emotion, just deadly precision." At Anzio, that infamous blood-soaked beachhead dubbed the Wildcat by Churchill, Murphy earned his first Silver Star by destroying a German tank at point-blank range with a bazooka. By the August 1944 invasion of southern France, Murphy had survived Sicily, Salerno, Anzio, and Rome, been wounded twice, decorated multiple times, and earned a reputation among both Americans and Germans as a soldier to be feared. During the advance through southern France, after his lieutenant was killed in an ambush near Montelimar, Sergeant Murphy assumed command of the platoon, organizing a defense with 18 men against a German company of over 100. Murphy held a critical crossroads for 2 hours, personally accounting for 15 enemy dead. His leadership earned him a battlefield commission to second lieutenant on October 14, 1944. By January 1945, as Company B approached the Kulma pocket, Murphy was no longer the baby-faced recruit who had joined in 1942. Combat had aged him beyond his 19 years. He had seen most of his original companions killed or wounded. He had personally killed over 100 enemy soldiers. The Kulmer pocket represented everything horrible about winter warfare. An 850-square-mile German bridgehead west of the Rhine. It was the last piece of French soil the Wehrmacht controlled. Hitler had ordered it held at all costs. The Germans had reinforced it with their best remaining units, including the 2nd Mountain Division, specially trained for winter combat in Norway. For Company B, the situation was desperate. In 5 days of fighting leading up to January 26, they had lost 102 men wounded and all officers except Murphy killed or evacuated. From a full-strength company of 187 men, they were down to 40 effectives. Murphy himself was fighting with a leg wound from shrapnel received 2 days earlier, though he had told no one about it. Private Anthony Abramsky described their condition. "We were finished, done. Most of us hadn't slept in 3 days. We'd been living on cold rations when we could eat it all. Half the guys had frostbite. Our machine guns were freezing up. We tried all night to dig foxholes, but the ground was like iron. When dawn came and we saw our positions strung out along the edge of the woods with open fields in front of us, we knew we were sitting ducks." January 26, 1945. Dawn gray and bitter cold. The temperature hovered around freezing with wind that cut through the heaviest overcoats. Snow lay 3 feet deep in places. Though constant artillery fire had churned much of the battlefield into a moonscape of frozen mud and ice. Company B held positions along the edge of the Batavir forest, looking out across nearly a mile of open ground toward the German H-held village of Holzfeuer. Murphy had positioned his depleted company as best he could. 2 M10 tank destroyers provided his only anti-tank capability. His infantry was spread thin along the wood line. He had established his command post in a drainage ditch that provided some protection and a good view of the approaching ground. Field telephone lines connected him to supporting artillery batteries, his only real hope of stopping a determined attack. The German attack was preceded by an artillery barrage that began at 1,300 hours. Tree bursts, shells exploding in the treetops, showered Company B's positions with deadly fragments. The barrage lasted 30 minutes, though to the men enduring it, it seemed like hours. At 1,400 hours, the German attack materialized. Private First Class Donald Ekman was the first to spot them. You could see the pennants on the antenna of the German tanks, 6 of them spread out in attack formation. And behind them, Jesus Christ, there must have been 250 infantry, all in white snow camouflage, moving across the field like ghosts. Murphy's first action was to call for artillery support. But artillery alone wouldn't stop this attack. The Germans were too spread out, too numerous, and moving too fast. At 600 yards, the M10 tank destroyers opened fire. Their first shots missed. The crews were exhausted and cold, numbed. Return fire from the German tanks was immediate and devastating. An 88mm shell struck the rear M10 squarely in the turret. The tank destroyer burst into flames, its crew scrambling out and running for the woods. The forward M10, attempting to maneuver for a better firing position, slid sideways into a drainage ditch, its tracks unable to find purchase on the frozen ground. Its crew abandoned it and retreated. At approximately 1,420 hours, with both tank destroyers out of action and German infantry closing to within 200 yards, Murphy made the decision that would earn him the Medal of Honor. He ordered his remaining men to fall back to prepared positions in the woods, but he himself didn't retreat. Instead, Murphy ran through the artillery fire to the burning M10 tank destroyer. The vehicle was fully engulfed in flames at the rear, where the 88mm shell had ignited its fuel and ammunition. Black smoke poured from the hull. The heat was intense enough to be felt from 30 feet away. At any moment, the remaining ammunition could explode, turning the vehicle into a massive bomb. Murphy climbed onto the tank destroyer and manned its 50 caliber M2 Browning machine gun. From this elevated position, he had a clear field of fire across the approaching German formations. But he was also completely exposed, a single figure silhouetted against the sky with no cover except the smoke from the burning vehicle beneath him. Private First Class Anthony Abramsky watched from the woodline. I saw Lieutenant Murphy climb on top of the burning tank destroyer while bursts of machine gun fire were heard. Pistol fire from the advancing infantry battered against the hull and tread. It was the greatest display of guts and courage I have ever seen. The M2 Browning was a devastating weapon in skilled hands. It fired 550 rounds per minute with an effective range of 2,000 m. Its half-inch bullets could penetrate light armor and tear human bodies apart. In Murphy's hands, it became an instrument of precise destruction. For the next hour, Murphy operated the heavy machine gun with extraordinary effectiveness. Throughout the engagement, he maintained telephone contact with supporting artillery, calling in fire missions dangerously close to his own position. The combination of his machine gun fire and the artillery he directed created a wall of steel that the German infantry could not penetrate. Sergeant Elma Broly observed from the wood's edge. The German infantrymen got within 10 yards of Lieutenant Murphy, who killed them in the drawers, in the meadows, in the woods, wherever he saw them. The environmental conditions made Murphy's stand even more remarkable. The frozen ground had prevented proper entrenchment. Visibility varied as overcast skies occasionally cleared. The extreme cold affected weapon performance and had left soldiers struggling with frostbite after days of continuous combat. Murphy's position on the M10 provided critical advantages that he exploited brilliantly. The tank destroyer sat at a slight elevation overlooking the German approach route, giving him commanding fields of fire. The 50 caliber's 2,000 m effective range meant he could engage targets at maximum distance while the burning vehicle's smoke screen prevented accurate German return fire. The German forces found themselves in an impossible tactical situation. Their tanks, expecting to overwhelm the weakened American position, discovered they could not advance without infantry support. Support that Murphy was systematically destroying. Wehrmacht doctrine emphasized combined arms operations, and without infantry to protect them from close assault, the tanks were forced to withdraw rather than risk isolation. Technical Sergeant Morris Wald, observing through binoculars from the battalion command post, later testified Murphy's fire was incredibly effective. He wasn't just spraying bullets. Every burst was aimed. He was picking off German infantry like he was at a shooting gallery. I saw him cut down an entire squad that was trying to flank our position. At approximately 1,500 hours, after 40 minutes of continuous firing, Murphy's ammunition began to run low. The barrel glowed red from heat. The burning tank destroyer beneath him was settling into the ground as its tracks and road wheels melted. German infantry had worked to within 10 yards of his position. Private Charles Owen recalled, "We could hear the lieutenant's 50 starting to slow down. He was running out of ammo. Some of the Germans must have figured it out, too, because they started rushing forward. Murphy grabbed his carbine and started picking them off with that. At approximately 1,510 hours, with his ammunition nearly exhausted and German infantry closing to within 10 yards, Murphy made the most desperate call of the battle. He ordered the artillery to fire directly on his position. The forward observer, Lieutenant Walter Weisfenning, initially refused, knowing it would mean certain death for Murphy. But Murphy insisted, "I'm giving you a direct order. Fire on my position. Now!" The first shells landed within 50 yards of the burning tank destroyer. The explosions threw frozen earth and shrapnel in all directions. German infantry caught in the open were torn apart, but Murphy, exposed on top of the vehicle, was also in the impact zone. Shrapnel tore through his leg, his second wound of the day, but he continued firing the few rounds he had left. The combination of Murphy's direct fire and the artillery barrage broke the German attack. The surviving infantry, perhaps 100 men, began falling back toward Holzweiler. The tanks, without infantry support and facing increasingly accurate artillery fire, reversed course and withdrew. At approximately 1,520 hours, after an hour of continuous combat, Murphy climbed down from the burning M10. His uniform was scorched from the heat. Blood ran down his leg from shrapnel wounds. Behind him, the tank destroyer continued to burn, finally exploding 10 minutes after he abandoned it. The battlefield before him was devastating. German bodies lay scattered across the snow-covered fields. Military historians estimate 50 dead with many more wounded. The surviving Germans were in full retreat, their officers unable to rally them for another assault. Murphy walked back to the woodline where his men waited. According to Private Abramsky, he was calm. Scary calm. He asked if we had any casualties from the artillery, made sure everyone was okay, then sat down and lit a cigarette like nothing had happened. His hands weren't even shaking. Perhaps the most striking aspect of historical documentation about this incident is the near-complete absence of German first-hand accounts. Despite extensive research in German military archives, the Bundesarchiv, and veteran organizations, no specific German soldier quotes, diary entries, or testimonies about Murphy's action have surfaced in accessible historical records. This silence is particularly notable given the engagement's intensity and the shock it must have caused among the attacking forces. Several factors explain this documentary gap. The German units involved suffered approximately 50 casualties from Murphy's actions alone, likely eliminating many potential witnesses. Wehrmacht division-level records from this period were often destroyed in the war's final months. The rapid German withdrawal following the failed attack, described in American records as disheartened by their lack of progress, suggests a demoralized force, unlikely to document what they viewed as a humiliating tactical defeat. The German units involved have been identified through operational records. The primary infantry force consisted of the 2nd Mountain Division, bolstered by elements of the 708th Volk Grenadier Division and the 285th Assault Gun Battalion. These were highly trained, elite formations. The mountain troops, in particular, were seasoned veterans with extensive combat experience, which made their inability to overcome a single defender all the more astonishing by German tactical standards. The 2nd Mountain Division's war diary for January 26 notes only that attacks on American positions near Holzweiler were repelled with significant losses, describing enemy resistance as heavier than anticipated. This official entry only hints at the extraordinary events unfolding within the German ranks. Veteran soldiers who had fought in Norway, Finland, and on the Eastern Front had never faced anything like this, a lone soldier who appeared impervious to fear, exhaustion, and the most basic instinct for self-preservation. Post-war German military studies, including Verteidigung gegen Überheit, Defense Against Superior Forces, published 1965, analyzed the battle and identified several reasons for the defeat: overconfidence due to numerical advantage, tactical rigidity once the initial assault was stalled, and the breakdown of combined arms operations when infantry and tanks failed to coordinate effectively. German forces never attempted another assault on Company B's position. Under the cover of darkness that night, they withdrew entirely from the sector. These elite mountain troops, specifically brought from Norway for the offensive and unaccustomed to retreat in 4 years of war, left without orders from their commanding officers. The psychological impact of being halted by a single American soldier far outweighed the physical losses. Murphy's defense at Holzweier had consequences beyond the immediate tactical victory. It allowed the 3rd Infantry Division to hold the critical Bedevere Forest, which controlled the approaches to Holzweier village. German failure to break through meant the Kulmer Pocket's days were numbered. Holzweier itself fell to the 30th Infantry Regiment on January 27, 1945. Within weeks, the entire German bridgehead west of the Rhine was eliminated, removing 50,000 German troops from the battlefield and freeing Allied forces for the final advance into Germany. The engagement demonstrated that even elite German units could not overcome determined American resistance, regardless of numerical superiority. General Jean de Lattre de Tassigny, commander of the French First Army, acknowledged its significance. The defense of the Holzweier approaches by the 3rd Infantry Division, and especially Lieutenant Murphy's extraordinary actions, broke the backbone of German resistance in Alsace. The tactical lessons from Murphy's stand, notably the effective use of combined artillery and automatic weapons in defense, influenced American doctrine for the remainder of the European campaign. French recognition came in 2000 when the 3rd Infantry Division was granted the right to wear the French fourragère. A memorial was also established at the battlefield to ensure that French citizens would remember the young American who played a pivotal role in liberating their homeland. The official Medal of Honor citation, presented by Lieutenant General Alexander Patch on June 2, 1945, formally acknowledged Murphy's achievement, though the typically restrained language of military documents struggles to convey the extraordinary nature of his actions. He was alone and exposed to German fire from 3 sides, but his deadly fire killed dozens of Germans and caused their infantry attack to waver. For an hour, the Germans tried every available weapon to eliminate 2nd Lieutenant Murphy, but he continued to hold his position. The award ceremony near Salzburg, Austria, brought together surviving members of the 3rd Infantry Division to witness their comrade receive the nation's highest military honor. Brigadier General Ralph B. Lovett and Lieutenant Colonel Howlett D. Edson, who had recommended Murphy for the medal, emphasized that Murphy's action had saved Company B from certain destruction and enabled the division to hold critical terrain. Murphy's reluctance to view his actions as heroic remained consistent throughout his life. When asked why he had climbed onto the burning tank destroyer, his response was characteristically direct. "They were killing my friends. It was not a heroic act. I figured if one man could do the job, why risk the lives of others?" Murphy's post-war struggle with what was then called battle fatigue, now recognized as PTSD, makes his story particularly relevant to modern understanding of combat's psychological toll. He suffered from chronic insomnia, recurring nightmares, and hypervigilance that led him to sleep with a loaded pistol under his pillow. Eventually, he moved to sleeping in his garage with the lights on, unable to tolerate darkness that reminded him of night combat. "I remember the experience as if I do a nightmare. A demon seemed to have entered my body." Murphy wrote about his combat experiences. His willingness to speak publicly about these struggles led to legislation creating the Audie L. Murphy Memorial VA Hospital in San Antonio in 1973, 2 years after his death in a plane crash. At age 45, Murphy's first marriage to Wanda Hicks lasted only 16 months, destroyed by his PTSD episodes. Hicks later described he was 2 people. During the day he could be charming, funny, generous, but at night he became someone else. He'd patrol the house with a loaded gun. He'd sleep in the garage with the lights on because darkness reminded him of night patrols. Despite his own struggles, Murphy became an early advocate for veterans suffering from combat-related psychological injuries. In 1966, he wrote for the Saturday Evening Post, "I can't remember when I didn't have nightmares. They became part of my life, like breathing. But I was lucky. I could afford doctors, medication, therapy. What about the veteran who can't? What about the thousands coming back from Vietnam with the same problems? Murphy's effectiveness at Holtzfeuer was amplified by the weapons systems he employed. The M2 Browning .50 caliber machine gun designed by John Browning in 1918 was arguably the finest heavy machine gun of World War II. Its 50 BMG cartridge could penetrate 1 inch of armor plate at 100 yards. Each round had devastating effects on human targets. The bullet's energy of over 13,000 foot lbs at the muzzle could literally tear a human body apart. The M10 tank destroyer carried 51 rounds of 3 inches ammunition in its hull along with 1,000 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition and 300 g of gasoline. When the German 88mm shell struck, it ignited the fuel, creating a fire that reached temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The fact that the vehicle burned for over an hour without a major explosion was miraculous. Murphy was essentially standing on a bomb with a lit fuse. The artillery support Murphy directed was equally crucial. The 105mm howitzers could fire a 33 pounds high explosive shell over 11,000 m. Each shell created a blast radius of 50 m with shrapnel lethal to 200 m. Murphy's ability to adjust this fire to within 50 yards of his own position, danger close by any standard, multiplied his combat power exponentially. Military scientists have attempted to calculate the probability of Murphy's survival at Holtz. Given the German forces engaged, 250 infantry with rifles and machine guns, plus 6 tanks with main guns and coaxial machine guns, approximately 10,000 rounds were fired at Murphy's position during the 1-hour engagement. Even assuming poor marksmanship due to range and Murphy's concealment by smoke, statistical models suggest Murphy should have been hit 15 to 20 times. The physical demands of operating the M2 Browning under these conditions were extreme. The weapon weighs 84 pounds and has violent recoil. Murphy had to maintain his balance on the burning vehicle while absorbing the weapon's recoil, all while being shot at from 3 directions. The smoke from the burning vehicle would have made breathing difficult and aiming challenging. Military historians and psychologists have long debated what made Murphy capable of such extraordinary combat performance. Was it his impoverished background that taught him survival at any cost? His hunting experience that made killing seem natural, or simply being in the wrong place at the right time? Dr. Dave Gman, author of On Killing and a leading expert on combat psychology, offers this analysis. Murphy represented a perfect storm of factors. He had the technical skills from hunting, the motivation from poverty, the emotional detachment from early trauma, and most importantly, a protective instinct toward his men that overrode self-preservation. This interpretation is supported by Murphy's own words. When asked why he climbed onto the burning tank destroyer, he consistently gave the same answer: "They were killing my men." The personal nature of that statement reveals Murphy's motivation. This wasn't about tactics or strategy. It was about protecting the soldiers he commanded. Murphy himself recognized the transformation combat had wrought in him. In a 1968 interview 3 years before his death, he reflected, "People talk about that day like it was heroic. Maybe it was, but I became something inhuman. That day, I turned into a killing machine. I felt nothing. No fear, no anger, just a cold determination to destroy." Audie Murphy's military record remains unmatched by any American soldier. He received every combat decoration for valor that the United States Army could award, some of them twice. His 33 decorations included the Medal of Honor, Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, Legion of Merit, 2 Bronze Stars, and 3 Purple Hearts, plus 5 decorations from France and Belgium. But Murphy's true legacy lies Beyond medals. His advocacy for veterans' mental health was decades ahead of its time. The Audie Murphy Memorial FAF Hospital specializes in treating PTSD and other combat-related psychological injuries. His autobiography To Hell and Back has helped thousands of veterans realize they're not alone in their struggles. Murphy's story has become embedded in American military culture. The U.S. Army Infantry School uses his action at Holtzford as a case study in defensive operations, leadership under fire, and the integration of supporting arms. The Audie Murphy Club recognizes exceptional NCOs who demonstrate leadership qualities similar to Murphy's. Master Sergeant Ronald Johnson, president of the Fort Hood Audie Murphy Club chapter, explains the continuing relevance. Every generation of soldiers needs heroes. Examples of what's possible when ordinary people face extraordinary circumstances. Murphy shows our soldiers that you don't have to be 6 feet tall or come from a military family to be a warrior. You just have to care more about your buddies than yourself. Military professionals often debate whether Murphy's stand could be replicated in modern warfare. Technology has fundamentally changed combat. Satellites, drones, precision munitions have created a transparent battlefield where individual heroics seem impossible. Yet recent conflicts suggest otherwise. In Afghanistan and Iraq, American forces repeatedly witnessed individual soldiers performing extraordinary acts reminiscent of Murphy. Staff Sergeant David Bolavia's house-to-house fighting in Fallujah. Sergeant First Class Paul Smith's machine gun stand in Baghdad. All echo Murphy's willingness to face impossible odds. General Stanley McChrystal, former commander of Joint Special Operations Command, argues, technology changes war's character, but not its nature. War ultimately remains a contest of human wills. What Murphy demonstrated at Holtz, the willingness of one person to say no further regardless of odds, that's timeless. At the U.S. Army's Maneuver Center of Excellence, Murphy's action teaches several critical concepts. The importance of position, the integration of fires, and the psychological dimension of combat. Murphy understood that killing enemy soldiers wasn't enough. He had to break their will to fight. His relentless, accurate fire convinced the Germans that advancing meant certain death. While the world celebrated Murphy as America's most decorated soldier, the young Texan was fighting a different war, one against the demons that followed him home. The man who had shown no fear atop a blazing tank destroyer was haunted by darkness within his own mind. Murphy's widow, Pamela Murphy, who married him in 1951 and stayed by his side until his passing in 1971, offered unique perspectives. Audie bore invisible wounds that never fully healed. He would awaken in terror, reliving battles fought 2 decades earlier. Yet he never ceased striving to support fellow veterans. The war never truly ended for Audie, but he transformed his suffering into purpose. This channeling of trauma into advocacy produced lasting impact. Murphy's public acknowledgement of PTSD helped establish its recognition as a legitimate medical condition requiring care, rather than a weakness or failing. His efforts enabled thousands of veterans to seek help they might have otherwise felt too ashamed to pursue. On January 26, 1945, Second Lieutenant Audie Leon Murphy demonstrated that a single determined individual could halt an entire army. His stand at Holtz shattered German preconceptions of American soldiers, not pampered boys as Nazi propaganda suggested, but sons of farmers and factory workers molded by hardship, capable of extraordinary resilience when defending comrades. The silence in German records from the day speaks volumes, revealing their inability to comprehend or explain what occurred. This was the deepest form of defeat, not merely tactical or physical, but psychological and moral. They had faced someone who simply excelled at war, and that recognition struck at the core of their warrior identity. Today, the fields outside Holtzfire have returned to peaceful farmland. The scars of combat are erased. Craters filled, blood washed away by decades of rain. Yet each year on January 26, a small ceremony is held at the memorial honoring Murphy's stand, attended by French citizens, American veterans, and occasionally elderly Germans, commemorating the day one soldier proved courage has no bounds. Murphy's story reminds us that heroism is not the absence of fear. By his own admission, he was terrified, but the ability to act despite it when others rely on you. It is standing firm when retreat would be easier, becoming larger than oneself in a critical moment. That is why the Germans were stunned when a single American soldier held off 250 men for over an hour. They faced something that military theory could not explain, tactical doctrine could not counter, and sheer force could not overcome: the indomitable human spirit of a 110-pound Texan willing to risk everything to protect his friends. His stand at Holzfeuer endures as eternal proof that one person, in the right place at the right time, with the right resolve, can alter the course of events. The boy who once hunted rabbits to feed his family became the man who stopped an army to save his companions. In war, as in life, the journey from ordinary to extraordinary remains one of the most profound truths.